we'll go ahead and get started since it's a little bit after 12. So welcome again. This is How to Build Your List the Right Way. I'm Craig. I'm the marketing director for NGP Van, and I am joined by Colin of ePolitics. And a little bit of housekeeping. So we have this webinar scheduled for about an hour. We will have questions throughout. So in your Zoom window, you should be able to see a chat box. You can pop things in the chat. And one of the things we'd love for you to do, and we do this little, get to know each other as we move along, just let us know who you are, introduce yourself, put your names and your pronouns in there, add the organization that you're with or campaign, and tell us the city and state in the chat so we know where you're from. And as we continue, we'll just, introduce ourselves and say hello. Oh, it looks like we're getting a message that chat was disabled. It is disabled. Okay. I will have to figure out how to turn that on. Can everyone see the Q&A box? Pop that in the Q. Well, obviously they could see Q&A. Okay, good. Perfect. So as we move along, please do put questions into the Q&A box. We will get chat fixed in the next moment or two so that we can all put our names, introductions, and all that good stuff. The Q&A, just pop it in there if you have a question. As we roll along, pop it in, and I'll be managing that, and Colin and I will be managing that as we move along. So great, we'll get rolling, and hopefully in the next minute or two, we can fix the chat. So, okay, so just real quick, getting to know NGP Van. I suspect that many people on this know who we are, but we're a market-leading ecosystem used by progressive Democrats, campaigns, PACs, unions, other organizations. We provide compliance software, digital tools, supporter engagement, electoral campaign engagement, voter outreach. Van, we've helped thousands of winning campaigns and candidates. So we are very happy to be doing this webinar. We know there's a lot of interest in building lists, and there's a lot of confusion around building lists. And there are, unfortunately, a lot of actors out there who maybe don't go about building their list the right way. So we've brought in one of our partners, Colin, who is an expert in list building and digital politics, certainly. And he's going to give us a little bit of background on how to build the list the right way. And in doing that, we'll also talk a little bit about how not to build your list or how to do it the wrong way. And some of the ways that maybe people have been doing things that are going to change on the social front too. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll turn it over to Colin now so he can do his own introduction.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be with you. And thanks so much, Craig, for setting the stage and for helping to pull this together. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all y'all. So some of you may already know me. I've been around the digital politics world for about a quarter century now, since the late 20th century, which is kind of crazy to think about. I do digital advocacy and digital strategy consulting for a variety of advocacy organizations and political organizations and political campaigns in the fall. I'm an advocate myself. I'm the founder and editor of ePolitics.com, which is in the middle of relaunching after I had to take a sabbatical for about a year. Everyone needs a break. I'm the author of the ebook you see to the right there, which you can find on ePolitics.com. I've been updating it every year or so for the past dozen years. So to my knowledge, it is the most comprehensive overview and guide to digital politics and advocacy that's available out there. And I also play bass in what I have to say is a kick-ass rock and roll band. So connect with me if you want to see us in DC sometime. All right, Craig, let's go take a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today.
And real quick before we jump there, I just want to say, Colin, and Colin, you know this because we've been friends for a few years, but maybe some of the people on the Zoom don't know this. I'm actually a local elected official in a Western PA town.
Oh,
it
right.
would be like a, like a local city council kind of thing. And I've been on that board for about 5 years now. I bought your book and used your book to help me. Other than actually using NGP's tools, which I did do before I ended up working for the company, I did use your book and it was super helpful. So I just want to
thank
say
you.
that.
I really appreciate it too. It's all an author needs to hear. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so let's dive in. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. So I may have to skip over some things pretty quickly just to give you more of an overview of what the options are. But I'm always happy to chat, and we'll have contact information at the end. Or you can get it, go to epolitics.com and contact me. But if you have any questions, just drop me a line, and I'm always happy to chat. So we're going to cover.
And this is when we're done with this, we'll provide the deck and we'll provide a recording of this too. And if we need to fill in some additional info, we'll do that. But just a quick agenda, we'll be going through a few things here. Ethical list growth. We'll be talking about opt-ins, list purchases and swaps, everyone's favorite topic. Activist communities, we'll get into ads and grass tops and influencers, micro-influencers, and we'll roll. So let's jump right in and
that sounds
go
good.
through the ethical list building.
Yeah, well, you say ethics and you think politics in Texas, right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. In my distant, misspent youth, I got to spend time in that building right there, the Texas legislature, where politics is played as a contact sport. But working in a legislature, I think working in a mayor's office or a city council member's office would give you a similar kind of view. You tend to take a very practical approach to politics. And, when I'm talking about ethical and effective fundraising, really it's a practical question, because ethical fundraising is effective fundraising. In the short term, unethical fundraising can work, but in the long term, I would question its sustainability and effectiveness. And we're going to talk about that more today. So next slide. So effective is you're reaching the right people and you're bringing them in at a reasonable cost in both time and money. And we always have to consider our time, internal costs. And then is it sustainable beyond the campaign, i.e., is this a channel that you can go back to repeatedly? Is this an audience you can go back to repeatedly once they've taken a couple of actions on your behalf? Is it basically, if something sounds fly by night, it probably is. Ethical, no scamming, no spamming. The content does not stray too far from reality. From some of our Republican colleagues, I get a lot of 13x, i.e. 13 times matching gifts. That's not realistic, right? These people are opening up themselves to a wire fraud prosecution, honestly. So we're not abusing the trust of our audience. We're treating our audience as people, not as ATMs. And Craig can talk about this more. It is opt-in only. Now, why do we want it to be ethical and sustainable and opt-in? Craig, could you go through some of the questions that are the concerns that a provider like NGP certainly has?
Yeah, I think one of the complaints that comes in often, certainly from people who receive email, right? Because a lot of us on this call are probably the political insiders, right? And we've worked on different campaigns. We've put different practices in place, some good, some probably bad or not so good. The complaint is from the public. And I know we have other people on here who've been very active in this and have, talked about this and held sessions, most recently in Netroots. The complaint is just spam, the number of emails, the number of junk emails, and it makes your email unusable, for one, right? I think you mentioned some of the other ones that are just kind of ridiculous, right? Like 19-time, match. And, some of these are just so random. I don't know how people come up with them. It clogs inboxes, it's junk. And that's obviously not what we want to put out there. Our goal is to make sure that our platform is being used by campaigns and by organizations that are communicating with their members in a way that their members want to be communicated with. So, we obviously know that there's time-sensitive nature to a lot of campaigns, and that presents challenges with list building. But hopefully the techniques we're showing here and some of the information we're showing here gives people a better understanding of what we consider to be ethical list building and the ways that people should try to build their lists ethically and effectively.
So let's look at the practical case for ethical and effective fundraising. And I'd like to give a shout out to Lauren Miller for a Netroots Nation panel hosted by Josh Nelson, where she brought up a number of these points, as did the other panelists. A list you bought doesn't know who you, your campaign, your issue is. If they haven't expressly made a decision to join your list, you're emailing them out of the blue. They're not likely to perform very well. They're likely to ignore your messages, and they're more likely than somebody who opted in to mark them as spam. And what this affects over time is your deliverability, right? The rest of your messages, even to people who have decided on their own to join your list, are much less likely to reach their targets over time. I have heard of campaigns that purchase large lists, and then there are folks who monitor email deliverability, the email scores from Gmail, AOL, MSN, the other major email service platforms. Basically, campaigns in the past that have bought a list out of the blue and start sending to it, in some cases have seen their open rates, their delivery rates decline by like a third. So there is a practical case for ethical fundraising, because the alternative, you're basically over time poisoning the well. And I will just point it out that churn and burn fundraising, as they call it, or churn and burn list building, where you don't care how well someone performs in 6 months as long as you make $1 tomorrow, that does tend to poison the well for everyone else in the field. So I know this has been a concern of a lot of people going back about a decade. But I remember running articles in ePolitics about this back in 2014. But basically, we're all fishing from the same pond. So if you're out there poisoning the pond, it doesn't help anyone else. But how can you use a purchase list ethically? Well, there is a little secret to that. And we'll talk about it in detail later on. But basically, you can use it as a Facebook custom audience. You can upload it to Facebook, run ads at the people on that list, and treat it as a prospecting universe rather than a group of people who've opted in to receive your messages. So that is an ethical way to use a list that came in over the transom or slipped in your email inbox somehow, or that you went out and bought. So we're going to talk about list swaps, but I'm talking about something very different than just getting a Facebook, or basically getting a list and then starting to spam at it. So let's go on to the next slide. So measurable success is something we generally want, but that requires measurement. And for many of you, this will be very familiar. But typical metrics: cost per acquisition, how much does it cost to get a new name or email? Cost per donation, meaning the cost to recruit a new donor, most likely, or per each donation. Cost per dollar raised, similar. And then other conversion metrics, like if you're running a political campaign, yeah, donors important, but volunteers are also important. Advocacy actions, if you're a 501c3, the petitions people sign or the calls they make to Congress, other advocacy actions they take. These are things we can measure. And this is how we can compare one channel versus another. So next slide, please. So the goal is generally conversions. And I want to put out a word for the humble website right now. This is obviously a website for a congressional candidate. You can guess, I think, that he's a doctor from the stethoscope around his neck. But look at the website. It is, can you go back? It is optimized for conversion. Email, zip. That's the most important thing you need from someone. You're not asking for too much information. You can get it later. Get involved, volunteer, contribute now. These are all conversion actions. So when you're going to be undertaking, any kind of list building effort, just remember, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more, the ad or the petition or whatever it is starts the process, but then you've still got to convert those people, typically through a landing page of some kind. And then also you've got to onboard them. I once worked with a group that had spent a good bit of money to raise a list through a company called Care2, but the client, for whatever reason, did not email those people for 6 months. They were not onboarded properly. When they did receive an email, it came out of the blue and they started marking things as spam. So pay attention to optimizing all of your conversion properties, all the places where people are going to convert, but then have a clear onboarding strategy in place. Craig, you want to add anything there?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh,
yeah, I always think it's smart to have that onboarding strategy. I think a lot of campaigns rush to immediately build their list. They're automatically thinking about, how do we go out and purchase that list? How do we go out? I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit about why that's not a good idea, but they want to kind of shortcut, right? And as we get into testing and we start talking about that, and I know we've got slides coming up on that, what you find is that you're much better off with a list of 5,000 people, with the majority of them that are engaged, than you are with a list of 100,000 people where they're not engaged. And there's a lot of practical reasons. There's actually programmatic reasons. I don't mean that, via advertising. You're going to get marked as spam more often. That's going to hurt your deliverability. That's going to hurt your chances. It's going to hurt everything downstream, whether it's organizing, fundraising, connecting and engaging, events, things like that. So there's a million reasons why you want to try to have that onboarding planned out and done in a smart way. The smarter you do your onboarding and the more you think about those channels like landing pages, the more you will actually grab participants who are interested and engaged in what your message is. So it's smart to think about that and not just rush to trying to build that list in some inorganic way.
Yeah, no, very cool. Let's move on. So I'm going to talk real quick about testing. We've talked about measurability, about measuring conversions. If you're able to track people who come onto your list by source using, say, UTM codes or a Facebook pixel or something similar, you can compare. This was an organization, someone who wrote up an article on my own website, ePolitics, about list swaps. And he was comparing 4 different intake cohorts, basically four different attempts to build the list, 4 different mechanisms. And he was comparing the long-term open rates of each of them. So, I mean, it's a little gobbledygook on the screen unless you know what it is, but that's basically what was going on. So, as you can tell here, list swaps outperformed Facebook ads and paid acquisitions for this particular group at that particular time. So let's look at, so if you're able to track origin sources, this can be a really important way to measure how effectively each list growth channel is working for you. So let's talk 2 seconds about A/B testing. Let's go to the next slide, because again, most of y'all probably are familiar with the basic concepts. This is an illustration of testing a landing page variation. Does orange work better than green? In this case, in theory, it did. But the idea is you're showing defined groups of people things that are somewhat different in a way that you think might make a difference in their behavior, and then you're measuring their behavior. If you go to the next slide, I have a little example from about 4 or 5 years ago. These are Facebook page-like ads, basically ads that you can run that people can't comment on, but what they can do is follow your page. So we were testing, in this case, the same image versus 2 different snippets of text, running them at the same time, trying to keep all the other variables constant. And then we were looking at the reach as a proxy for cost effectiveness. And on the one on the right, the one that's emphasizing jobs, was outperforming the one on the left. And we ran tests like this many times for this particular wind power campaign. And we found consistently that job language outperformed clean energy language with most audiences, but not all of them. But that's just an example of isolating the variable when you test. So that's about it for testing. Just, again, there are many good articles on optimizing landing pages, optimizing emails. I encourage you, if you're interested, to go learn more, or if you have some basic questions, I'm always happy to chat. Why don't we go on to, all right, so let's start getting into tactics here. Now, when you hear list swaps, you probably think one organization is going to give its list to another. But we're really talking about something that's not a swap. It's more often, basically, you're trying to let one list benefit another and vice versa. A common way to do it is to do a joint action, say a joint petition with both groups featured on the landing page. And you want to make sure that this is prominently shown so that people know when they're taking the action that they're joining both groups. Or another way to do it is, especially this list swaps work particularly when you have groups that are working in similar but related areas. Now, there are issues that can come up, right? What if one group has a list of 1 million and the other group has a list of 10,000? Well, one of them is likely to benefit more from the other. But it can be a good way. Now, especially in the nonprofit space, a lot of groups are kind of jealous of their lists. But you can actually help build your activist community, help build their connection to you by giving them something that they care about, right? Even if it is an action from another group. Again, the goal being that both of you collect names from whatever the featured action is. Or you can just go ahead and email, each group emails one about the other. If we go to the next slide, if we can show that one. So here's an example where one group sent out a message in conjunction with Democracy for America. DFA was blasting their list. The org who sent this message was blasting its list. And, they're teaming up to get as many signatures as possible. And that, basically they're getting as many signatures as possible, and the signatures are going to both groups. So this is a screen capture from an email sent out by the group that was teamed up with DFA. So if you can go to the next slide. So the reason I bring up list swaps is and this is also a section from an email or an article on epolitics.com. Oh, by the way, after this is over, I'll pull together these list swap articles and put them on the front page of ePolitics. I forgot to do that beforehand. But,
and just real quick, Colin, the chat box is open again now, so people can chat. Please do continue using the Q&A section for specific questions, but feel free to, throw other commentary into Blaine Ola into the chat. Thanks.
Nice to see. Yeah, I'm seeing the chats pop up here. It's great.
Yeah. And if anyone missed, introducing themselves, feel free.
All right.
Thanks,
so the reason I bring up list swaps is that, especially if you're teamed up with an organization that operates in a similar space to you, groups can sometimes get really good response from this, and it doesn't cost you anything but time. And this is from that similar, if you remember the tracking chart I showed earlier, this is another way of showing the same kind of data. You have, the average of all ads, the average of all acquisitions, and then the average of the swaps. So you can see how the swaps bring up the overall level. This was an example of how much for this group at that moment with this issue, list swaps way outperformed their paid acquisition channels. Now, conditions may be different in your area. You may not have a good ally to team with. All the usual caveats apply. But for a whole lot of organizations, this approach has made a big difference. So just something to think about. And again, I'll post those articles. I think I have 3 of them from a few years ago, but I mean, this is email. Nothing's really changed that much.
And I just want to highlight,
yeah.
I think when a lot of people think about swaps, they think about, Colin is a candidate for Congress in, CD4
Right.
in Florida, and Craig is a candidate in CD5 right next door. And Colin shares his list with Craig, and, people in the district over, or even in a totally different state, are getting emails from someone who they have absolutely no relation to, and they have absolutely no connection to. And in most cases, they probably don't care. They might feel like, oh, Colin is for the environment, I'm for the environment, so hey, why not just blast an email to that person? That's not the kind of swap we're talking about here, just to be clear. We're talking about a collaboration between 2 organizations that have similar issues, that think similar ways, that are really promoting each other, but also doing it in a way that the opt-in is clear. The opt-in is, hey, this is a very obvious opt-in. We're just not blasting you with this person's information. We're actually telling you we agree with this person and we want you to opt into their list as well. That's the kind of swap we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I point out, if you're a candidate, let's just pick John Fetterman out because he's, highly prominent in Pennsylvania. If Fetterman were to send an email to his list about a down ballot candidate, encouraging people to donate to the down ballot candidate, that's a great way to build relationships, right? If you're thinking of, political power for years to come, politics is based on relationships. So, candidates can work together. Even, again, they often think of themselves as competing for donations, but, things like list swaps can, the voluntary kind can work even in a case like that. So, list swaps or, I'll email people on your behalf, that can be a relationship, ultimately a power building kind of move. So why don't we move on? All right, so another good place to go fishing is where the fish have already gathered, right? So a lot of you will be familiar with activist communities like Care2, Civic Shout is a newer addition, Daily Kos, petitions on Daily Kos and appeals to the Daily Kos community raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for candidates in 2018 and 2020. Mother Jones, they have, obviously you can advertise on a site like that. You can, these groups also have email lists that you can get included in. Democrats.com is another one for profit. Other online communities, publishers, podcasters, basically anyone with an audience that you, that an audience that might be a good fit for your campaign or cause. Right now, the trick is make sure that you are only getting opt-ins, because some communities will sell you a list of people who say clicked on a link or engaged with a piece of content. That's not the same as opting into your list. And if you are emailing a list of people who did not choose to join your list from one of these communities, you're likely to run into all the problems that we laid out before. But that being said, communities like this have already done a lot of work to gather activists in one place. Now, again, because these are folks that are frequently being reached out to for these kind of questions, they they may be getting bombarded from all sides, but at the same time, if they join in the first place, there's someone who wants to be active anyway. So
I also think a good distinction here, a good distinction is some of these organizations, and there are lots of them. I mean, in past campaigns, when we've received endorsements or the candidate has received an endorsement from a group, a union or whatever, those groups have sent out these kind of collaborative emails asking people to opt in. But I think what's interesting about some of these groups here on the screen is that they have pretty well segmented lists, and they might do a focus like around Earth Day. They might focus on their opt-ins for environmental justice and things like that. And if that's really a big part of your campaign, you could kind of tag on to that and piggyback onto that. Of course, we still want them to be opt-ins, but you can kind of target different groups based on events, based on special days, based on issues. And sometimes you can get a very targeted list with your message to those groups.
Well, Craig, we've got to hustle. We're at 12:30, so let's get moving here. All right, so I will point out just one last point on those activist communities. You are generally paying for the privilege. You are paying Care 2 or Civic Shout per name, typically. For some of those other places, you may just pay for the placement. But we have already moved out of organic growth and into paid growth. So let's look at Facebook advertising first, and then we'll move on to search ads, take a quick look at programmatic advertising, and then we'll take more questions. So here are just a couple of examples of how you can do it. The one on the left goes to a petition. Add your name if you think it's time to take action on gun violence. What happens when you sign that petition? You will start getting emails from the Democrats. The one on the right, I think, is particularly interesting because the Clinton campaign ran this in the summer of 2016 after it was clear Bernie Sanders was not going to win, but there were a bunch of Bernie Sanders supporters out there that had not come home to the Democrats. So she was targeting Bernie supporters with this ad, and or targeting Democrats who may not be as enthusiastic after the primaries. So timing is everything, right? And of course, now we're going to actually look at a couple of examples of Clinton ad landing page. Let's go to the next slide here. So here's another ad that Clinton was running, as you can see, earlier in the primary, before the first Democratic debate. Notice the details, right? The color scheme, the photo, the suit that she's wearing. So go to the next slide. Look at that. It's basically the same photo. The color balance looks a tiny bit different, but it's the same photo, same outfit, same color scheme. This is the landing page, right? So the ad and the landing page, basically the landing page echoed the ad. And you might say, well, perhaps that was her default landing page. Craig, go to the next slide. So this is what the campaign's just generic join page looked like at the time. Different outfit, different photo, different color balance in the photo. So this is just, as I said earlier, the ad starts the process, the landing page finishes it. And this is just an example of the kinds of continuity you want to try to build in. So if you go back one more. So these ads that we were just talking about, those were ads that were pointing to an action or a petition on the candidate's website. This was the way that we did list building through Facebook for a long time. Now we can go to the next slide. Facebook a few years ago rolled out a product called lead generation ads, which we could, Craig, if you go to the next slide. So this automates the process of filling in the form for people. So if someone clicks on a lead generation ad, Facebook will pre-populate their name, email, other contact information. Then they'll have to go through a couple of screens, accept it, basically opting in expressly, which is good. And then once they're done, they're done. They have signed up for your list or taken whatever the action is. If you have your mass email CRM system connected to Facebook, which is pretty straightforward, I think, for most of the providers, then the leads will flow directly into your email system. And once they're there, you can have your welcome series set up. You can begin your onboarding process. Now, you might think that lead generation ads will have completely wiped out the earlier alternative, right? i.e. running an ad and linking to an action on your site. But I have spoken to people whose campaigns and organizations in the last couple of years who have done a lot of testing on, basically testing the cost per acquisition, all the various things that we mentioned earlier. And they, at times these groups have found that simply linking to a petition on your site from an ad can outperform a lead generation ad. So again, your mileage may vary. I would, if you're going to do a large outreach or a large, list growth campaign, and you're going to be using Facebook, I would consider testing lead generation ads versus ads that link to an action on your own site, and seeing which ones get you the better cost per acquisition, and then over the long term, the best cost for performance. Craig, anything you want to add right there?
Again, here, I think it's a great idea to have your end game in mind here when you launch these. Not only just, hey, what do my ads look like and where are we going to send these people? But I also like to have a pretty good nurture stream or a follow-up, right? Because the idea is just not to get them in the door and forget about them. The idea is to get your supporters in the door, to put them into a CRM like NGP, to tag them appropriately and understand where they came from, and then to make sure that when you're doing programs that speak to their interests, that you're engaging them in the proper way. That's the best way to engage your audience and to keep them engaged, rather than just to shout at them. You mentioned before using people as an ATM, right? All the emails that come out are donate now, donate now, donate now. If you think about this deliberately, who you're asking to come on board and to tackle it that way, you'll have much higher engagement down the road.
Yeah, no, I agree 1000%. So let's talk about ad targeting. So you've got the two different options there, right? Ad linking to an action on your site versus lead gen ads. But what kind of targeting are we going to do? Well, we might be geo-targeting. That's pretty straightforward. It's the same way that a campaign might geo-target its geo-TV ads to the right district. You might be trying to reach donors in a particular area or volunteers in your district where you're running. I remember being on a panel a dozen years ago with a Republican who had been running for city council. He was a libertarian Republican running for city council in DC, and he had been running Facebook ads targeting the LGBTQ community, using them to recruit volunteers for his campaign, and had had very good success with that. I would note that that kind of targeting would be a lot harder now, because Facebook has gotten rid of a lot of the interests that we used to target to reach people of particular political persuasions. However, there are still other interests that one can use, and I would just encourage you to explore interest targeting and see what options are available in your field. Like I said, it's a lot harder than it used to be. Demographic targeting, again, for fairly obvious reasons. Now let's talk custom audience targeting. Now, this is that purchase list, or maybe it's a list of your own supporters, or maybe it's a list of your own donors. But you basically get it into a spreadsheet, into Facebook's format, and check their format documents very carefully, because, like, for instance, you need to have a country code for every single person you upload, or at least you used to. So, and if you don't, they may not match them very well. So just be very careful to look at the parameters for any place you're uploading an audience like this. Now, as we mentioned earlier, you can use a custom audience to target people with ads on a list that you purchased, but you could also turn that purchase list into a lookalike audience. And a lookalike audience on Facebook or similar platforms is basically based on all the information that, say, Facebook has about you. They're going to find the people who are most like your audience in the broader public on that platform. For instance, one might upload a list of past donors, use that to target them directly for current donations, turn them into a lookalike audience, basically expand to a much larger group of people who are similar. See who responds to that appeal, then turn that group into a new lookalike audience. So you can get pretty recursive there if you want to. These are very powerful tools for a lot of people who are building fundraising lists. And again, it's because we're dangling bait in front of people who are similar to our existing donors. We're giving them the opportunity to self-select as a new donor, advocate, or volunteer. So I'm always happy to talk custom audiences and lookalike targeting, that kind of thing, if you want to follow up afterwards. The last one I'll point to is behavior or engagement targeting. I'll give you an example if we can go to the next slide. Retargeting. If you'll remember, lightning can strike twice. Targeting based on your Facebook behavior. So for instance, I have known groups that would put a Facebook pixel, and if you have questions about that, talk to the folks who run your website technology. But you install a Facebook pixel on your site, and Facebook then tracks people as they move through your site. So for instance, you might find half the people who go to your donation page don't complete the donation. Well, Facebook would potentially be able to use that as a targeting audience. Facebook engagement retargeting, people who have engaged with a page in this case, but you can also retarget people who engaged with who engaged with a piece of content on Facebook. And that's something that the Trump campaign did on a vast scale in 2016. They dangled sometimes up to 100,000 ad variants a day in front of people, trying to see who would respond. And then they would turn the people, basically when you responded to that, you went into an engagement audience, and they would follow up with you with more content, all trying to get you on their email list so they could raise money from you. So if we could go to the next slide. Lookalikes, yeah. So it is a little weird how lookalike targeting works, because it is based on all the things that you've done on Facebook. But as I mentioned earlier, it can be a very powerful way to reach people. And if we'll just go to the next slide real quickly, that is Brad Parscale. That is the man who managed Trump's massive scale outreach in 2016. However, for anyone who would like to emulate what they did, Facebook has restricted the number of ad variants that a given page can run down to, I think, around 180 or 200 or something like that. So you can't do what the Trump campaign did back in 2016 at that scale, but you can still put content in front of people in pretty, niche sort of interests, and see who responds to that content. And then turn that into an engagement audience, and then target them with advertising to try to get them on your list. Again, I know this gets very intricate, and if you have questions, like I said, I'm happy to follow up. So one last Facebook bit. A common piece of targeting that we used for a long time was friends, people who like your page and their friends, which Facebook called connections targeting, especially for grassroots campaigns, local groups, state ledge candidates, people like that. This was a pretty useful tool at times. However, Facebook got rid of it in July. So if you're used to, just keep in mind, if you've built a peer-to-peer friend-to-friend outreach into your plan, you're probably going to have to get rid of it now. So that's Facebook. So why don't we take some questions? Or Craig, if you have any observations.
It keeps getting stuck on mute, sorry. No, this is great so far. I think one of the questions we get a lot of times, and we'll actually have a webinar about this probably in the new year. It's possible we get it done in December in preparation for the new year, but one of the questions we get asked a lot, especially by the younger or inexperienced campaigns, is how to budget for ads. So, there's always a question about how much do we spend, what's the return, things like that. And we've done that webinar in the past, and we'll repeat it again probably early next year, just to give people a sense of how to budget, how much they should budget, what the returns are going to be, things like that. So, if people are interested in that, just let me know in the chat, and we'll make sure to connect everybody when we do that one.
Yeah, that sounds great. That is a question I get all the time too. And I'm very happy to chat about that offline too. So as we put Facebook in the rearview mirror, I want to bring up some other channels people might not think of as much. This is a campaign I worked on a while back that was trying to recruit whistleblowers. We were geo-targeting ports, like the Port of Houston, the Port of Long Beach, New Jersey, Newark, people whose mobile phones spent time in a port we would follow up with them with LinkedIn advertising. And we worked with a company called with a Rising Tide Interactive to get those to make that work. But basically, we were geo-targeting recruiting ads. Now, this was grass tops recruiting, right? This isn't sign a petition. This is, we need you to take a very serious high-level action, which can be pretty difficult. And in this case, we didn't recruit anyone. Perhaps we started someone down the path, but yeah. But LinkedIn can be very valuable for campaigns, particularly if the candidate is in a profession, a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, because LinkedIn makes it very easy to target people by profession. I do a training every year for the American Medical Association for people who may run for office in the future. And the AMA really stresses LinkedIn for them. And again, this is not so much building a grassroots list, but building a grass tops list. You can do organic outreach. You can also do paid outreach there. So for some campaigns, it may make sense. So I want to just leave it in there as an option. Although I think for most of us, it'll be a lower level consideration. And if we can go to the next slide, yeah, the grass tops recruiting. So if you go to the one after that, yeah, here's another example of doing it, this time through Facebook. In this case, I was working with environmental defense funds, and we were running ads trying to basically recruit people that Republican office holders might listen to when it came to climate change. So in North Carolina, we were trying to reach farmers who want solar on their land. In other places, we were trying to reach small business owners. And then we would pass the people who engaged with the content, we would pass their names to a field team who then potentially would reach out to them in person. So again, you know, we weren't trying to recruit thousands, we were trying to recruit dozens. So definitely think about online tools, advertising for grass tops, not just grassroots. So we've got a couple of more channels to go through, and then we can take a couple of questions. So search ads, all the way back in 2008, Barack Obama's campaign got, I think it was like a 4-to-1, somewhere in that range, a 4-to-1 return on investment just from search ads. Now, it helps to be a very popular person that people are looking for, right? But anyone who's running for president these days is going to get a Google ad up right away, right? I think it would behoove even down ballot candidates to get a Google ad up. And of course, you're going to link to something on your website. Now, you also want to get a Google ad up on your opponent. So when people are searching for information about your opponent, they can get you. Now, again, if you're a high profile campaign, if you're a Warnock or a Fetterman, you know, you'll have enough name recognition that people may be searching for you. So they're probably, my guess is that these are probably a more effective list building tool for higher level, not higher level, but higher profile campaigns. But anyone can benefit from the messaging and the name recognition that you can get from search ads, particularly when you're running them on your opponents or on, you know, events that are coming up in your district, things like that. So again,
even at the
ads,
local levels, when my municipality is about 35,000 people, and when I ran in my ward of about 9,000, I ran ads throughout the municipality in this exact way. And it was a big boon to the web traffic, where I had a lot of issue-based content. So to me, that was worthwhile. And it was only a couple $100 worth of ads. Yeah,
that's a great thing. You're only paying when people are clicking. So again, probably a smaller part of the budget, but I would include that in a balanced breakfast. So let's talk influencers and micro-influencers. And there are a few platforms out there. Main Street One is an example. I believe Vocal Media is another one that have basically put together lists of influencers, and you can pay them, right? So there are platforms out there to try to find influencers who can act on your behalf in channels like, here we go, in channels like Twitch or TikTok or some such. You can also go, though, regardless of where you're running, you can still look for people who are online in your area that have a big following and take them out to lunch, take them out for a beer, right? You can, and then, if they're interested, they talk about you on their show or they mention you to their followers, particularly if you've given them a link to a sign-up page, that can be another good way to bring in a few people here and there. The problem with influencer outreach, even with paid influencer outreach, is making it scaled down ballot, right? I'm just not convinced that it's really going to replace advertising for most people. I will point out with Twitch, the video game platform, a friend of mine talked about a campaign that she worked with a popular gamer that raised several $100,000 for an Asia Pacific Islander organization on the West Coast. But this was a Twitch streamer who, played for 24 hours on their behalf because he really cared about what they were doing. The best influencer is someone who cares. Someone who's paid may be helpful, but someone who cares is probably going to be far more helpful. But again, just think of people who are in, the community of folks you're trying to reach, who are people they may be listening to. So, all right, I think we just have one more major topic. Yeah, let's talk programmatic advertising. So this is where the robots come in, right? Programmatic ads follow the person. They target the person rather than the online property they're on. So the people are usually familiar with the Zappos ads that used to, once you went to Zappos website, look at shoes, the ads would follow you around all over the place. They're more than just that kind of retargeting. You can work through vendors. I don't want to favor one vendor over another. I personally have worked with DS Political in the past. There are other folks in the field that you can look at as well. But with programmatic advertising, I can either upload a custom audience like I would to Facebook, or I can set demographic parameters, upload a voter file, or use a voter file export, or use the voter file baked into the platform itself. But I can reach people when they're on news websites, entertainment websites, sports websites, conceivably a list building tool. However, in practice, programmatic has turned out to be, in most cases, better for persuasion than for list building. But if you go through to the next slide, this is a group I work with every fall now called the Hometown Project. They recruit celebrities who either grew up in or have other ties to targeted state legislative districts. And then we run ads targeting the local voters with videos featuring, the celebrity talking up the candidate. Here's an example from Michigan from 2020. Ghostbusters fans may recognize Ernie Hudson. The thing I wanted to point out on this is we were doing these for name recognition and persuasion. But when we ran a similar campaign in Virginia, we found that we were getting a click rate on the videos of around 1/3 of 1%. And we ran banners, we were getting about 2/3 of 1%. So in the end, we sent 700 or 800 clicks to each candidate's website, right? Now, I don't know if it worked for list building at all, but if we send somebody through to a website, I'm sure it helped with name recognition. So, you could try using programmatic for list building. I would just want to test, start a trial project and test to see if it's going to be as cost effective as the other channels we've talked about. So just to run through the list we've covered so far, onboarding, basically the practical case for ethical list building. We talked about onboarding, the importance of conversions, of optimizing your online properties for conversions. We've gone through Facebook. We've gone through LinkedIn. We've talked about lookalike targeting, custom audience targeting, influencers, micro-influencers, and we even had a cat picture. So I think we covered the internet pretty well today. So you want to go to the end slide and we'll take some questions?
Yeah, and there are a few other topics that are probably the more tactical, on the ground, the more
Yeah.
volunteer supporter engagement, using events tools like Mobilize and other tools like that. And that may warrant a second webinar on this topic. Some of the more,
that'd be great.
Yeah. So maybe we can come back to that one. But I think there was also one more question. Let's see, 2 questions. Here's this is Colin's info on screen. Obviously, our info there. If you want to demo the software, you can go to ngpvan.com/get-elected. And Colin's ebook is at epolitics.com/winning. It's a fantastic ebook, like I said. I have used it and it is very helpful.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, I think we have, let's see, a couple questions. Okay, great.
Yeah,
so the example of a Facebook ad with a news article about the King Tide, did that link directly to the article or to a sign-up form for Clean Energy Florida?
That's a great question. That one in particular, that one actually linked to a news article. In this case, the conversion happened, like I said, this is grass hops recruiting. When individual Facebook users would like that or comment on it, a field organizer would go look them up. And they were trying to find small business owners, actually local Republican elected officials, people who might be a voice on climate that a Republican senator might listen to, right? So in that case, the news story was bait. It wasn't trying to get a conversion action out, when somebody clicked the link. It was trying to see who was interested so that we could follow up. But that's a very good question. And I will point out that the group acronym often touts the value of promoting stories from, if you're a Democrat, promoting stories from conservative sources when they actually make your points. For instance, acronym saw very good results when there were times where Tucker Carlson would be critical of Trump over something. And when acronym promoted those stories out to conservative audiences, they would often get very, very good response, as in a lot of likes, shares, clicks, comments. So, but excellent question.
We have one more question from Marcus, who's asking where can we find a list of our targeting audience? Maybe a little bit more detail there.
I'm not quite sure. Unless you're targeting.
Okay, those, so he's saying those that didn't vote.
Oh, that is a trick. In that case, you're probably going to have to go to one of the data vendors. You're going to go to Catalyst or Target Smart, Aristotle, L2. If you're trying to find, the hardest thing to find is people who are not registered to vote, because they are not on the voter file, right? Sort of by definition. But again, the data vendors work to try to, they work with the commercial ad networks and things like that. They try to find the people that have not registered so that, we can turn around and register. And even using a tool like,
Van Vote Builder will give you information on who's
exactly.
voting, who's not voting, very quickly information about absentee ballot chase to the extent that you're doing that, understanding who's voting early and who's not. And you could obviously turn those into actionable lists that you can back into any of these methods of list building or outreach in general.
Thank you. I forgot to mention Van. Yeah, if you're running, if you're working for a Democratic campaign, the odds are pretty high you'll be using the Van, which will have the voter file built into it. If you're using, there are other advertising tools. Again, I'll mention DS Political. Their democraticads.com tool has voter file baked into it. So there are options out there, but yeah, you can also go to Catalyst, CATALIST, Target Smart, L2. They used to be labels and lists. Now they're L2. They started, as you can tell, in the direct mail world. And Aristotle is another old one. I personally have worked more recently with Catalyst and Target Smart. They are Democratic specific.
Cool. Okay, great. Looks like we're at time here. There are 1 or 2 more questions that are being asked here. We'll either put them in an email or follow up with people separately. We have your information. We did record the session, so after this, it'll take a few minutes to transcode the recording, and we'll get that up on the site somewhere, and we'll get a link out to everybody. And then we will send a copy of the deck out to everyone as well. So if that's helpful, great. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact us. Colin's information is actually, it's not up. Is it up on screen? It is. Yeah, perfect. Colin's information's up on screen and our information's up on screen. Please feel free to contact us. Thank you everyone for your participation. I see a comment from Michael. I'll answer your comment either in email or directly. Josh, thank you. Appreciate it. And, you know, if this has been helpful, just let us know. Let us know here. Let us know if there are topics that we missed. Please let us know.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we're trying to do is to try to improve the space. I know there are many people on this webinar now who have been trying to improve the space and how we work and how we do things. And I think there are several ways we can do that. And one of the ways is really to teach people the right way to do it and how to do it and to be positive and to be responsible in the way we do this. So thank you, Jessica, for SMS. Yes, we'll definitely add that. You know, there are a lot of ways that you can do this in a positive way. And I think we need to do a better job of teaching people on the front end. A lot of campaign staff bring the tools with them, right? From one campaign to the next, to the next, to the next. And, you know, then they're running for president and they're working with, you know, lists of millions of people and not hundreds. And it's really important that we catch people as they get into this space and help them understand the right way to do things. And that's what we're trying to do here and moving forward. And obviously a big part of what we put out from an education standpoint. So thank you to Colin from ePolitics for leading this webinar. Thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to Jamie. I think she just dropped off. She solved our chat issues, but appreciate everybody joining. Thank you. We have a great webinar coming up next month where we will be discussing some updates to the NGP product around donor prospecting. So that's a really good one coming up, and we'll notify you about that shortly. But thank you all for participating, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.